Good morning, Madam Chairs, esteemed committee members. Brianna January with Chamber of Progress in respectful opposition to LD 844. Chamber of Progress is a tech industry coalition advocating for the progressive future of tech and inclusive access to that future. Our partners do include innovators like Apple and Google, but they do not have a vote or veto on our positions, unlike other trade associations. Committee, one of our top priorities is making the internet safe for young people, and we share a lot of the concerns that you heard today from the de facto bill sponsor. However, we do believe that LD 844 poses significant privacy issues and would disproportionately harm Maine's most vulnerable youth. Simply put, LD 844 would undermine privacy and online experiences for all users, including adults. As written, the bill requires covered platforms to verify the identity and age of every single user. As you've already heard, committee, this would be a tremendous encroachment of individual privacy. In fact, estimating the age of a user will require more data, acting contrary to data minimization efforts. And we're talking about very sensitive personal data. As a result, online services might opt out of gathering identifying information altogether and instead treat all users as minors and only serve content geared towards kids. Imagine, for example, YouTube only serving YouTube Kids in Maine because instead of wanting to hold a bunch of sensitive private data required by this bill, should it become law, they would instead take the safe approach and just treat everyone as a minor. Just to not have to simply comply with the overburdensome data requirements of the bill, every Mainer would be at risk of losing access to important online information. Furthermore, LD 844 mandates age verification using, quote, government-issued identification documents and, quote, documentation verifying parental authorization. By default, this would prevent access to online platforms for those without official documentation, whether those might be undocumented immigrants or those simply because of hardship or old age who do not have an official government ID for whatever reason. I'll also note that there are very few third-party age verifiers that exist, and those that do have absolutely horrific track records with cybersecurity. In fact, just a few months ago, one of those age verifiers had a breach and a lot of personal sensitive data was released. Secondly, we are particularly concerned that the bill could be weaponized by anti-LGBTQ guardians to prevent queer Mainer kids from accessing community resources and safe spaces online that are quite literally lifelines for these folks. I'll also urge the committee to consider the challenge of, for example, divorced parents who might use accessing online content against one another, and therefore the child would then be most harmed. Lastly, I will also caution, like my colleague from Net Choice just did, that other states that have enacted similar restrictive laws around social media use and kids have had them struck down in courts in just the last 3 weeks. We've seen this done in Maine and California twice, as well as Texas. Maryland, not Maine, sorry. Thank you for that consideration. And just on a personal privilege, quickly, speaking of Maryland, Madam Chair Carney, I recall over the summer that we met at a DLCC event and we talked about being Maryland girls and our love of Baltimore sports. And I just have to say that I am thrilled that the Orioles are back next week. So I hope that you will be supporting from the North. But thank you, committee.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Committee members, are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for presenting today. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but it's occurred to me as I've been listening to testimony that I remember when my sons were young, I wanted to regulate what they did online. And
Absolutely.
I know Facebook had a minimum age, and if they wanted to get a Facebook thing, they had to lie about their age or give a different birth date. So it seems like this sort of thing it's already in place. There are, so I don't know why this would, I haven't looked in detail at the bill, but I don't know why this is different than companies having minimum requirements for children to participate. Maybe you could.
Excellent question. The difference here is that those requirements are voluntary and do not require a user to submit something like a government issued ID. That's the real concern here, is that you're asking for private third-party companies to literally hold the identifying information, whether it be you taking a picture of your driver's license or your birth certificate or something of that matter, and hold on to that private, very sensitive data to verify that you are of age. And then even a step further to verify that you are the guardian of said minor and that you give them permission to be on the platform. So this goes much further. It truly does pose security risks when it comes to that privacy, but it also risks having a lot of adults. If I was personally tasked with having to upload my driver's license to Facebook just to keep up with my high school friends and their pictures of their kids, I don't know that I would, because it's private sensitive data. And we're unfortunately, to be clear, Chamber of Progress is a center-left organization. Our goal is to serve Democrats at the state level as a tool and resource on tech policy. We are worried about the current administration and access to that sort of data. If you have a private company that has a bunch of private information, I could see a situation in which a federal government might say, hand over all of the information that you have on folks that are actually undocumented, right? They don't have the full driver's license, for example. We're actually seeing this play out in New York a little bit, where the Attorney General currently is drafting regulations on a law that they have similarly passed last year. And it's a challenge for their office right now to think of that complicated fact of having a bunch of information of potentially, for example, undocumented folks that would more or less rubber stamp that, yeah, because they just want to be connected with their family and friends online, it's now proven that they're undocumented. And what does that mean to have that sort of information that could be used by the federal judicial system in a challenging way? Thank you.
Other questions, committee members, Representative Lee and then Representative O'Halloran?
Thank you. I'm not sure that limiting content available to only that content that's safe for minors is necessarily a negative thing, frankly. But that notwithstanding, I'm curious if your organization has any alternate legislation that you've drafted or have available as to how we deal with this issue of social media in the hands of minors.
Excellent question. Personally, I feel that and on behalf of Chamber of Progress, I should say, I truly feel that online safety and digital literacy should be our next step in civics education. Not that we've necessarily done that 1000% well as a K through 12 public education system, both at the federal and state levels. But we really are in favor of having this become a part of our curriculum for K through 12 kids in public schools, right? Whether it's identifying and not playing into misinformation and disinformation, whether it's about safety online, whether it's about what sort of content is appropriate for ages. That's one mechanism, and we know that there are several states that are considering looking at digital literacy, for example, as a way of kind of tackling this issue, but also to get at the root of really what is the challenge with youth mental health. And that's resources, whether it's, and I know that that's a challenge for everyone right now, but whether that's in our public schools, whether it's in our health systems, whether it's family support, surely there are things online that can exacerbate mental health issues, but those problems usually don't start online. And so really getting at the root cause of them is one way that we think we can also help tackle this. I'll also note that while we do not have domestic partners that are social media platforms, we do work with Meta over in Europe for European policy, but not for domestic policy. I will note that a lot of platforms, though, do have a lot of resources and tools to prevent bad content, if you will, or harmful content from getting to kids, including the use of algorithms themselves, which is actually how content moderators can literally see what's being pushed and then actually demote it, if not remove it altogether. So that is one thing that I'm pleased to see, that this bill does not touch algorithms, because it's actually counterintuitive to touch them, because you actually need them in order to regulate content online. That said, I think that this is really an education issue.
Thank you. And then Representative O'Halloran, were you next? Could you turn on your microphone, please?
Thank you for coming today. I was just kind of concerned about hacking. So if they're collecting information, because if they're under minors, they have the child and the parents, which provides them with their address and personal information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I alluded to it in my testimony. As I said, there are only a handful of third-party verifiers right now, and they either use things like this bill would require, which is uploading official documentation, or they use things like scanning your facial features and trying to decide if you're a minor or not, which has a whole host of other issues because it's been found to be very biased towards darker skin tones where they consider you to be older than you are, and then whiter skin tones, you're younger than you are, so then they get that wrong. But the data itself, those couple of verifiers that do exist, there have actually been hacks in just recent times. Like I'm talking the last few months, one of the major verifiers was hacked, and that's all private sensitive information. And we're talking about literally, like I said, having to upload official documentation for a minor, which would be either like a driving permit or a birth certificate or, what else is available. It's very concerning. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much. And if it is helpful, I do have a colleague who works specifically in the Southeast, and I'm happy to connect you, Madam Chairs, if you want to talk further about that Florida bill and where things stand.
Thank
That's
you.
just not my region. I'm in the Northeast.
Thank you.
Happily. Thank you.